Out of this unity of the language arose among those true. Out of this unity of the language arose among us the true fellowship in higher intellectual enjoyment to which we are solely indebted for our political unity, a unity which could never have been achieved without the unceasing activity of those whom we, in the highest sense, call the educated, and to whom Goethe first gave the common direction. Before Goethe, there were three great poets who exerted over the nations from which they sprung a power which may be compared with the influence of Goethe in Germany. Homer, Dante, and Shakespeare. All that is comprehended in the term spiritual influence is especially to be claimed as the effect wrought by these men on Greeks, Italians, and English. Each in a different way. It is true, but the success of each places them in almost equal rank in every single Greek, Italian, and Englishman. Can the chain, as it were, be traced, which binds him irrevocably to one of these three great leaders of the people? Without them, Greece and Italy would be cold political abstractions. Homer and Dante have called into being the higher unity of Greece and Italy, which stands far above the political, and who knows what an exalted role Shakespeare may yet play in the fragments of English-speaking peoples. The world over shall at some time seek for a supreme authority in whose word they may feel themselves united. And who knows what offices are reserved for Goethe in Germany in the future, changes of our destiny. But let us speak of what he has already accomplished. No poet or thinker since the time of Luther has worked in so many different directions at once and permeated with his influence 4 successive generations as Goethe has done. How wholly unlike was Voltaire's work in France. So far as quantity is concerned, Voltaire embraced far more. Certainly he worked more intensively than Goethe. Also during his life, his writings penetrated more instantaneously, deeply, and widely among the people, but he was not so unresistingly believed in. He did not stand upon the same moral height with Goethe. Voltaire destroyed, Goethe built up. Again, Goethe never tried to create a party for a momentary aim. He always granted his rivals full scope. His immortal weapons were too precious to be used against mortals. Goethe worked quietly and imperceptibly, like nature herself. We see him everywhere recognized, without envy, as a man raised above men, an Olympian enthroned over the world. Jean-Paul calls him, to whom no one could give anything, who was enough to himself. Goethe stands lifted above love and aversion. The few who have acknowledged themselves his enemies appear from the outset to have much trouble in maintaining their standpoint, while today they seem utterly incomprehensible. And even as regards these, it was good fortune for any one to have been in relation with Goethe, and it was impossible to ignore him. Almost too much appears to have been said about Goethe even now. An entire library of publications concerning him exists. This increases daily. Latterly, scarcely a week has passed in which, either here or there, something new about him has not been printed, and yet these labors dedicated to him are but the faint beginnings of a work which must stretch on to a boundless future. Goethe's first century only has elapsed, but to none of the following, so far as the future can be foretold, will be spared the trouble of ever anew reshaping Goethe for themselves. The German people must change their nature before they will cease to do this. For thousands of years there has been a science called Homeric, which has had its disciples in uninterrupted succession. For hundreds of years, one that bears the name of Dante and one that bears Shakespeare's name. Henceforth there will be one called Goethen. Indeed, Goethe's name long since designated not his person alone, but the circumference of a whole domain. Each generation will believe that it comprehends his nature better. Never until now does the right standpoint seem to have been attained from which Goethe can be impartially studied. Opinions in regard to his work will vary. He will appear to stand nearer to or farther from the German people, according to the character of the times, but he will never be wholly dethroned, never be resolved into himself, never melt as a glacier of which, when the last drop has run away, nothing remains. If, however, that should happen, which has happened to Homer, that after the lapse of thousands of years, when our German shall have ceased to be a living language, wholly distant generations may be unable to conceive that a single man could have created so many and such various kinds of works, then may the learned men, who will certainly for a time be believed, affirm that Goethe is to be interpreted only as a mythical name under which the entire intellectual work of his age was comprehended. It would seem as if already the time approached in which the German people, after having gone too far in their adoration of Goethe, were inclined in some degree to withdraw their homage. But this is only an appearance. A few have tried to represent Goethe as a discarded aristocrat who had rendered his service and might rest. Such things have been said. But what begins to be strange to us about him is not what Goethe is in himself, but the image bearing his name, which the last generation formed of him. We live in a new era, which must create anew its own image of him. It overthrows the old one, but does not touch him. Today, more than ever, it is important that our attention should be turned to him, but another standpoint must be accepted. This change of standpoint is the natural result of the different position we occupy in Germany today towards all historical inquiry. Before Germany was united and free and stood politically on her own feet, the aim of our historical labor was to burrow into the past, out of which, as secret advocates of a course of proceeding, which we did not dare openly to call by the right name, we ventured to initiate for ourselves a better present. All historical work bore the secret motto: it is impossible that things in Germany should remain as they are.